Hello there, and welcome along to Series 3 and Episode 16 of the Gardener Ben podcast, which is brought to you in association with Peterbilt's Roses, winner of 30 Chelsea Gold medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbillsroses.com. I hope I find you well wherever you're joining me from in the world, and that you've managed to find a little bit of time to get out into your growing space, whatever that looks like over the last week. It's been a very heavy week to say the least here at North Lodge, and I finally got round to kicking off the 2026 Great Sweet Pea Grow Along. So if you want to know how I grow exhibit quality sweet peas here in the garden, follow my step-by-step guide on Instagram, YouTube and TikTok now. I'll be updating the series as everything goes along, and I'll be checking on with you regularly and taking you through the stages that I do to make sure that I have great big long and very beautiful stems on my sweet peas that last for weeks and weeks. Out in my garden, enough was enough, and you may remember me several weeks ago saying I was going to stop procrastinating and putting things off. And there's been two very large tasks on the job list to do since last August. The first of which was to cut back our incredibly large laurel hedge at the front of the cottage. This is around 10 foot deep and about 17 foot high. It had been getting taller and taller and taller, and there is evidence actually within the hedge itself that before we purchased the house that the boughs of the hedge were large enough to have actually hung over the drive and likely to have actually rested on our thatched roof. Before we purchased the cottage back in 2018, there is evidence within the hedge that these boughs were removed, some of them measuring over a foot in diameter. However, as you can imagine, this is an incredibly large task and it's not particularly easy to do, mainly because of the sheer width of the hedge between us and the boundary. I've been trying to keep the faces nice and tidy, but it's slowly but surely been getting wider and wider. So there's no way that you can simply reach it from either of the outside edges. You have to go up through the middle. So there was no more putting it off, and as we were motoring on towards February, it's a great time to actually cut back laurel. It regenerates really well, and although I haven't taken much out of this, if you have a laurel hedge at home that's got a little bit out of hand, or maybe a freestanding plant that you want to do some regenerative pruning on, February is the perfect time to get out and do it. At this time of year, the plants are shedding a lot of their evergreen leaves and starting to form buds and even small flower spikes for the months ahead. So if you can get out and do any regenerative pruning on laurel, this is the time to do it. The other thing that I've been putting off, which incidentally was tied to the first item, was actually to pollard back our weeping willow. Our weeping willow is one of the main reasons my husband fell in love with our cottage in the first place. There were two items that he swooned over, one of which was our front gates, which date back to the mid-17th century, and then the large weeping willow which stands in the middle of the lawn. The weeping willow, however, is a little bit problematic for our insurance company, and they won't tolerate it if it gets over 7 metres tall because it is only just over 7 metres away from the cottage itself. So every 2 years I have to once again scale the ladders, which I have to confess were actually hidden in the laurel hedge. I actually put them into the laurel hedge around a year ago when I last did the top of the laurel hedge and refused to take them out because I didn't need them for anything else. So I left them in the laurel hedge until I needed them again. Well, obviously I had to cut the top out of the laurel hedge before I could then move the ladders out of the hedge and then go on to prune the weeping willow. The weeping willow normally puts on something in the region of about 4 metres in height over the 2 years, and it needs to be knuckled back completely. And after a conversation with Nicola from Soulful Wisdom Academy just a couple of weeks ago, I had actually agenda setted with the weeping willow that I was going to be cutting it back in the next week or so. So once I'd finished with the laurel hedge, it was time to wrestle with the ladders, put them back into a 2-stage formation and actually deal with the willow tree itself. This year, because there's going to be so much waste off of it, I'm actually planning on weaving the offcuts from the tree into a series of willow hurdles and groins in what used to be the wildflower meadow. So as you can see, all of these projects are coming together in a series of events. I had to do the laurel hedge so I could get on with cutting back the willow. I had to do the willow so I can get on with actually weaving the hurdles and planting the borders. So everything is connected and everything is coming together nicely. And as I mentioned on a recent YouTube live stream, I'm starting to fall back in love with my garden here at North Lodge once again. Although I confess it's taking some work to pull it round into the shape it needs to be. One, so the book can be photographed during 2026, and secondly, that we can open our gates to the public once again during the months of June or July, which I'm very much looking forward to doing. This week, the Gardener Ben podcast heads down to Brighton on the south coast of the UK, and I get to speak to Anna, who is the co-founder of a company called Seedball. With her roots and background firmly planted in conservation, with a love of wildflowers, Anna and her co-founder set out to make wildflowers easy to grow and have since diversified the business into other areas, including herbs and salads. All seeds are wrapped in their special mix of clay and compost infused with chili powder, making them easy to sow, and the chili powder stops the seeds being eaten and taken away by ants. I hope you enjoyed the conversation that follows, and head over to Seedball now on Instagram, YouTube or TikTok and show their account some love. Well, today on the Gardener Ben podcast, I'm joined by Anna from a company called Seedball. Anna, welcome along. How are you?
Great. It's a lovely kind of autumny, wintry day here in Brighton, so I'm very much enjoying the looking out over the autumnal woodlands.
That weather has certainly turned. There is certainly a nip in the air just at the moment, isn't there?
Well, everything was frosty this morning. It was amazing, and there was snow yesterday, which is just amazing. I love
No,
I love all the seasons. So
no,
honestly, I don't mind. I'm not a complainer about the weather.
no,
I'm
never.
very much embrace it.
You can't have had snow in Brighton. That must be quite a rare occurrence.
Bonkers, huh? I can't believe it.
I did see something on social media this morning that somewhere had reported almost 18 inches of snow yesterday. Um,
No way.
I'm not, again, I haven't fact checked that, so please don't take that as as actual fact because we know what the internet is like. But yeah, someone had posted quite a lot of snow. Now, Anna, you're from a company called Seedball. Would you like to tell the audience? I think the name is quite self-explanatory, but all about Seedball and what it is that you do.
Yeah, so I'm co-founder of Seedball. We've been going, oh gosh, the donkey's years now, trying to think about 13 years. And it's basically an easier way to grow wildflower from seed. And we have
Hmm.
expanded, we do have herbs and salads and things now, but the primary goal was to be able to grow wildflowers. And that all came out actually from me wanting to grow wildflowers and being a pretty rubbish gardener. And I tried loads of techniques, just scattering seeds down, but they all got eaten by birds and taken away by ants, and they just disappeared. I tried to propagate them at the time, it was my uni house had a greenhouse.
Yeah.
And I tried to propagate them in the greenhouse with zero skills and zero time, and they all died, the wildflower seeds. So
Well,
it was.
traditionally they don't like being looked after too much, do they? They don't like being fussed over too much.
They're just slow growing. So actually, they were most challenging to get going because I was doing a conservation PhD. I really wanted them because I knew the impact that they would have. But they're
Hmm.
so slow to get going, and they're such a faff that I really was like racking my brains for a good way to grow them. And it happened that I went to a permaculture course. I don't know if you've ever come across
Yes,
permaculture.
I've done a little bit and visited a
Oh, have you?
permaculture. Yeah, and visited. I actually somebody who I met very early on in my horticultural career actually run a permaculture installation in Acklety Buey, all the way up in the very highlands of Scotland, in a very remote
Oh.
place. And I had the pleasure of driving all the way up there, aged about 18, and had a look at that. That was extraordinary. But yes,
It is amazing. Yes, I was doing my PhD up in Scotland, and there's
okay,
Findhorn up there, if you're
yeah,
aware of it. And there's all this kind of biodynamic farming and really cool stuff. And so I come across the kind of seed ball technique there, which was used as a way of growing farm crops without damaging the soil. So it was a
yeah,
no dig method. And there was also a friend of mine doing research on how to stop pests eating seed that was
okay.
stored. And so I combined the two together to create the seed balls that we've got now, which was a mixture of clay and compost and chili powder, which was the addition that we did based on my friend's research.
Okay, and
So they, yeah.
can we touch quite briefly on why why you're seasoning these seed balls? Why do they
Season seasonable.
why they need a little bit of pepping up, a little bit of pepper?
I love it. Yeah. No, this is the funny thing is that really we have such a lot of predators of seeds in the UK and slugs as well that
Uh-huh.
take them. So even if you can get them to germination stage, which is in itself quite hard, once they germinate, I found that everything was being eaten by slugs and snails. So what deters ants and insects and slugs and snails is actually chili powder.
Okay.
Um, and so it's because of the way that they are kind of smelling out their food, shall we say,
Hmm.
that chili powder really puts them off. So it's a general tip, actually. If you do have a problem with all these animals, slugs and snails, even squirrels, if you have problems with pests taking your seeds, taking anything, you can just literally scatter chili powder liberally across your garden and it will help.
Well, I
So
guess
yeah, we
that,
incorporated it.
yeah, that's a new one to me. I mean, there was a trend, obviously. I think we'll all remember the TikTok trend back from lockdown of everybody covering everything in cinnamon, which
Well,
was
it's a
just
similar vibe. No, it's a
okay.
similar thing. It's a
Yeah.
similar thing, and that is based on the science of using these strong sort of spicy smells to stop predators taking seed predators, we'll call them, taking your seeds or seedlings. And it's used. So my friend actually was doing research on how you get you're protecting grain stores in Africa, and that's
Hmm.
how they were protecting them. And also, it's how they stopped elephants going into fields was chilies around the edges of fields, like where they were growing pineapples. So it's across the world, like a kind of nice organic way of controlling pests. And we thought, let's give it a try. Let's see if we can incorporate them into our seed ball mixture.
Hmm.
And then we ran lots of different trials. So so at this time it was from a flat in London. Um,
As you
and
do, yeah.
yeah, all the balcony pots were filled with wildflowers growing, different sort of dimensions of seed ball until we eventually came to what we've got now, which is 1 centimeter,
Uh-huh.
which is the perfect diameter for rain to be able to break it down. So you don't
Okay.
even need, if you're so bad like I am and you just ran out of time and forgot to water them, then there would be enough water from rainfall to help germinate your seeds, and also then they'd be protected enough whilst they're going. You don't need to like watch over them like babies. But
Okay.
obviously, if you do water them more and watch over them more, they'll grow quicker and more effectively.
So it was a trial to see yeah, a toss up between if the ball was too big, the water wouldn't permeate and the seed would remain dry and it would obviously
Yeah,
not grow. And if the ball was too small, I suppose it then became at risk of seed predators and actually being eaten again.
yeah. So it's quite an entertaining time
I was
actually to
just
be
going to
able to
say
do
it's a
that.
really,
Yeah.
really, a really interesting process because I mean, obviously, I've come across the product. I've actually seen the product. I've held it in my hand, and I think I got
Yeah.
I got some for Christmas from my mum a couple of years ago. And we had a wildflower meadow here, and I actually sort of I didn't throw them. I actually planted them, not as planted them, but I put them in several locations where there was holes within the wildflower meadow itself, and used
Yeah.
it to sort of add a little bit of biodiversity. So within the actual seed ball itself, if someone was it's to buy one of the seed ball wildflower mixes, what kind of varieties are you mixing into that? What can I expect to come out of one?
So when we originally started off, we started with just perennials and our bee and butterfly mix, which was a
Hmm.
mixture that was based on, again, it's all very scientific, so that's where I came from, the kind of research papers of what the best plants were for these
Yeah.
species. But now it has evolved, because some people really want poppies, so we just have poppy seed balls. We have single species cornflowers. We've got mixes for birds which go to seed so that you don't even have to buy bird seed anymore from the shop. You can just leave your wildflowers to seed.
Well, that's a,
Ones that
that's a,
attract beetles.
that's a little ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Seed
Well, I
seed
mean, that's
seed
how
balls
it should be.
seed
Seed
balls
balls for seed.
but yeah, protected against seed predators to feed.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's it's the cycle of life, isn't it? So you're
It
just trying to
is,
get
yeah,
them past the small seed predators like your ants, really,
yeah,
in
yeah.
order to then eventually feed up your birds. But the whole aim is just to create this biodiverse garden. I was working with the government, like local government, straight out of my PhD. DEFRA to advise them on help. It was a little bit of research here there about honeybees and about national parks.
Hmm.
And I came across this stat that said that the area of all of our gardens combined is actually larger, far larger than all of our national nature reserves combined.
Yes,
So
it's quite a shocking thing, isn't it, when you let it
it's
sink in and think about it? Yeah.
amazing. It doesn't take into account balconies and hanging baskets and our vertical spaces that we can create for nature.
No,
So
and when people think oh they don't have any control over the biodiversity of their local area or actually making a positive impact on environmental trends, actually we all have the ability. I mean, I'm sat here with the privilege of a third of an acre wrapped around my house, and that was a conscious decision we made when we bought this house. We bought a smaller house on a larger plot. That was our choice, but
yeah,
most people don't make that choice. They buy the biggest house and normally on the smallest plot. And but
yeah.
yeah, we are still in control of more open space than anything else, and we've most of us have paved over it, gravelled over it, astroturfed over it, and we're causing a real problem with it. So yeah, it's a really interesting fact to hear.
Yeah, and conversely, though, the nature recovers really, really fast. The
It does,
insects
yeah,
do.
yeah.
So if you are planting for insects, you are putting that bottom level of the food pyramid back in very quickly. And even if you have that paved over area, you've got paved over front garden, you can still put pots in and window boxes that are just perfect for pollinators and have the most amazing impact.
So it's really lovely to hear this fed back to me actually, because I'm not, I'm always banging on about this to people on my social media channels, and sometimes you know what it's like. You sometimes feel like you're screaming into the darkness with these things.
Yeah, I think
Just
it's because people feel so intimidated. I used to
yes.
feel really intimidated, that it was um, really hard for me to garden and I didn't have time and I didn't have knowledge. And when I went to garden centres, and this was a while, like a long back, it felt intimidating. It felt like a world of people that knew what they were doing
Hmm.
and had the equipment and the skills and the training. And I was just a student that wanted to grow flowers. And so I think that's changed a lot. And also perhaps with lockdown and TikTok and gardeners like yourself that reach out to different generations. I think that it's demystifying a lot of this and
Well,
empowering people.
well, hopefully it is. But by the sound of things, you were a very, very young, a determined young person as well. Because nothing was going to stop you, was it? You're going to use abandoned greenhouse, probably in your student house, and you were going to use your balcony.
Yeah, nothing was stopping me.
Yeah, definitely an eco warrior from a young age, which is again a story I hear time and time again on this podcast. I always like to explore with my guests how they ended up with a passion for gardening as a general rule. So, I mean, is your similar story to sort of the other guests I've had along? How did I mean you were drawn to wildflowers, but why wildflowers? What was the draw?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. Um, Obviously, I went into conservation, and it was animals and nature that always captivated me. It was
Yeah.
always my safe place, was watching, even being really little. I used to like crawl and like under the hedges and just watch the birds flying around. And I don't know, I was a weird child. I'm a weird adult. That
I don't, I
it
don't,
matches.
I don't think
But
that's weird at all.
but my grandma used to walk and just point out all the different wildflowers, and they just, I don't know, the names were amazing. We had books with the wildflower fairies. When I
Hmm.
think who it was that had those, but got, I don't know, it just felt like it was filled with magic, that world. And that I've kept with, and that I've done with my children. Is try and keep the magic of, you know a garden is the most magical thing in a way. If you plant a flower, you get bees and butterflies, and then you get the birds that come from that, and even bats will come. We've got a moth attracting mix that's for bats, because
Really? Okay, well,
yeah,
I neglected to see that in my research this morning because moths are something that really seem to really divide people. I think they get a bit of a bad rap, don't they? I mean, I've got members of my husband's family who are proper terrified. I mean, just really scared stiff of moths, and I absolutely adore them. And we have a really, really large bat population here where we live, and as a result, we don't have very many moths. I've tried putting out sort of night traps and sort of finding out what the biodiversity is. And having planted the big wildflower meadow that we had, I mean, I have
Yeah.
since started. Unfortunately, won't want to hear this. I am in the process of removing it, but for the last 5 years, I have sort of gone out at night to try and see what kind of moths we have about, and there hasn't been very many, and I've been quite disappointed. So it's really interesting to hear you have a moth mix.
Yeah, we've got, I mean, a couple actually. One with the Royal Entomological Society,
Yeah,
and the bat mix is really to attract moths,
yeah,
um, because you're not. I mean, what you're sharing, sadly, I think, is just the trend. Is that not only are there not many butterflies, there are not many moths, and
no,
you might have a patch of wildflowers that are amazing, but again, if the neighbors don't have flowers, then you're essentially just like a little food island.
hmm,
And what we need is we need everybody to do a little tiny something that connects our countryside right through the cities so that you then have that biodiversity.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so it's quite sad in that way, is that a lot of our urbanization that has occurred and use pesticide usage has really showing in the last 30 years, I think, has been the biggest impact,
yeah.
sadly. So I think making a concerted effort from my perspective, to create mixes that specifically attract um, those animals, I think that's where I'm really excited about this product.
Yeah, I mean I'm a huge fan of our sort of furry nighttime friends. I mean, they completely captivate my imagination. They really do. But again, I have to say I do love the bats, and I love nothing more than to sit out in an evening and watch the bats fly around the house. I mean, we had a local study done here, and we have 3 or 4 types of bat living very close to the cottage. And I mean,
Oh,
thank goodness they're not in our roof. Otherwise, that would have caused us quite a lot. Because I've got a very old house. I've got a 327-year-old house.
oh, lovely.
So yeah, I'm quite grateful they're not living in the roof, but I am aware they are in one of our neighbours' roofs and in one of their trees. So yes, they are a firm favourite here, especially of a winter's evening, watching them move about. So
Yeah, see, I've always loved them. I think that, but I like, so I've liked moths as well. I've I've always enjoyed all biodiversity of stuff, but bats I think captivate me. They just look like something, they're amazing when you see them out and you're like, first you think it's a bird and then suddenly they start moving really crazy and it's that realization that it's a bat. It seems really special.
yeah, it's
Um,
just
yeah,
lovely. Yeah.
it is really.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about some of the other mixes that you have? You mentioned a herb mix, and what else was there?
Yeah, so we have just launched a range of different herbs actually. So that's in our tube range. We started out with tins,
Hmm.
and towards more the gift market, I
Yeah.
suppose. But we also have like bulk bags of things. Another thing that's really amazing is our lawn meadow mix. You talked earlier about these little gaps in your wildflower meadow.
Hmm.
So very often, lots of us have these patchy lawns after winter.
Yes.
Um, and so one of the things that we developed with the Wildlife Trust, and we give money, we donate to the Wildlife Trust with this mix, is a mix that you can just pop a few seed balls in and pop in the lawn flowers that remind us of childhood. You know,
Hmm.
there are daisies in there, and clover and bird's foot trefoil, and so you can kind of increase your biodiversity in your lawn mix, but also that gives money for the Wildlife Trust. And we've just launched, in fact, with the London Wildlife Trust specifically, some more butterfly mixes with them.
Yeah.
And we've got mixes that are specific for different types of bees now. Yeah, so really anything that you can think of. And our most popular mix out of all of them is probably our shade mix, because
Yeah.
there's very few people, I guess, that are blessed with that level of garden that you got. Most people are battling the fact that they've got a small, perhaps new build garden and they don't know what to do and it's all in shade. So we've got that shade mix that's based on woodland flowers, and
Yeah.
that's one of our best sellers.
Just gonna say that sounds like a really useful one, especially. I say it's a lovely thing to hear that you're encouraging people to get some biodiversity back into their lawns. 'Cause let's face it, I mean, it's I have a little bit of lawn. I mean, most of my garden is not lawn. It's probably, I was trying to think of a percentage term to put it into perspective. I probably only think about 20% of our entire plot is laid to lawn, and it's under threat at all times as far as I'm concerned. I don't find it particularly useful. I find it a little bit of a bind to keep mowing. And as a biodiverse part of the garden, it is particularly flat, isn't it, when you grow
Yeah.
one species en masse. So, and again, we've become as a culture really quite obsessed by the fact that the lawn has to be green and the lawn only has to contain grass. Over recent years, we've seen a nice culture of moving back to me. My lawn is not just grass. My lawn's got all sorts of stuff in it because I don't overly treat it, and because it performs better when it's got a mix of stuff in it rather than just grass. So it's really interesting to hear you sort of hopefully encouraging people to encourage put trefoil and clover back into their lawns, because we're seeing a much bigger trend of that coming back into lawns, aren't we? And whole people planting entire lawns of, for instance, clover as a much
Yeah.
hardier substitute for grass, because it actually can take the weather that we're getting much these days much better.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You know,
Yeah.
planting wildflowers in your borders as grass is actually more drought tolerant. It's more capable of dealing with extremes of weather. So, and it's also lower maintenance. And also, if you've got less of a grassy area, so you've got quite a small lawn, and you've got kids, and you've got a dog, or that area has got a high footfall of traffic, something like clover can handle that much more than grass can.
hmm And of course, absolutely adored by the bees, especially
Yeah,
especially the bumblebees. Yeah.
yeah. So it's a win-win all round. It's like biodiverse, less effort, less maintenance, more likely to remain green and alive in the kind of extreme weather events that we have. So I don't see a downside really.
No, not to me. I was my lawn continues to be under pressure. I must confess. I think over this winter season, I should probably lose about another 15 or 20 square meters of it, because I'm always, yeah, and that's unfortunately, I have to admit it. My followers and my listeners already know what happened, but there are so many roses now. There,
Oh, I love
I
roses though.
so do I, but it's getting it's getting a little much. And they keep on coming. So last year I reviewed 81 roses during the last year, and I've already got 65 to review next year. And being a proper plant hoarder, I can never get rid of any. So my collection swells very quickly. So the wildflower meadow was the last area of the garden that was, yeah, we'd laid it to be an area for nature, but I'm still taking it in a way that is very nature intended. I'm not going to be working it like other areas of the garden. I will plant it and I will cover it in cardboard and mulch it, and then I will be planting companion plants through it. But I've just got to have somewhere to house last year's roses, and then we'll have to be in this situation again this time next year. Well, I think, what on earth am I going to do with the nearly 100 that I'm due to review this year?
Oh, amazing. Amazing. Must smell amazing. And I think, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
you, like you said, you can companion plant them. So
Yes, yeah,
nothing
yeah.
wrong with underplanting the wildflowers in with the roses.
Well, no, I was just going to say it's a way that I've gardened in the past. When I moved into my last property, which was about 17 years ago now, we didn't have a huge amount of money, and we had a very large garden. We rented a house with a really quite large garden, and our landlord gave us free rein to do whatever we wanted to do with that. And I had some plants, and we planted borders up, but they're less really large spaces. And I actually obviously didn't at the time I didn't use Seedball because you weren't in existence back then. You only founded what 11, 12 years ago. But
Yeah.
um I actually did plant wildflowers in clumps, and it was a
Yeah.
really great way of filling out the borders really quickly. And within, I don't know, maybe sort of 6 months of sort of putting in a few roses and a few shrubs, with very little capital investment from myself and a few packets of wildflower seeds, things like cornflowers, as you mentioned earlier, and some calendula, some French marigold, that kind of thing. I was
Mm.
able to fill out large borders really, really very quickly. And at that time, we actually kept some geese. This is I'm rambling on a little bit now, but we kept some geese. So I
Your
actually
landlord's very tolerant.
Oh, well, they were very, very tolerant indeed. Yeah, I actually, well, they used to eat wheat, an awful lot of wheat, and I actually did actually sow some wheat into the borders as well, and I ended up with a
Yes,
really lovely mix of stuff that
yeah.
moved beautifully in the wind. So that was a really cheap and a very effective way of filling out borders very, very quickly.
It is. It gives you a really abundant cottage garden look with minimal capital invested, and actually that there's not much maintenance. If you're adding in like perennials along with your roses, you really are going to get better display every single year anyway. So you're
Yeah.
going to get more oxeye daisies. You're going to get larger and better red campion, which looks stunning in with our normal garden
Hmm.
flowers.
Have an
And
have an
it's
awful have
something
an
that just
awful lot of
improves.
that here. Yeah, just got awful
Yeah,
lot of that here. Yeah.
yeah, I think that it's something that's to be said for once you get it in, grows quickly, looks incredible, and just gets better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and looks great. A lot. I think it's a traditional cottage garden look because there's nothing different to me in looks with the between an oxeye daisy and a marguerite, something like that.
No, no, quite.
Um,
Yeah.
looks so similar, and it's just yeah, looks very pretty, very
The
easy to do.
Yeah, the Oxeye Daisy will always remind me of my late nan. They were her
Oh,
absolute favourite, and there was a roundabout. It's still there. I'm not saying there was a round. There is a roundabout close to where I grew up. A very large roundabout, actually, off the motorway, which is absolutely smothered in them. And it's, I say, the roundabout must be several hundred meters across. It's actually huge, and it's this huge swathe of Oxeye Daisies. And whenever I drive that around at a certain periods of time, that always reminds me of her. And again, flowers I find are like that. They tend to remind people of a certain time or place or person in their life. And I think the oxeye daisy for me is one of those lovely ones.
oh yeah, no, they are they're just lovely, and I think that they're one of the ones that win people round to wildflowers. When we started out doing seed ball years and years ago, really having wildflowers in the garden was not a popular thing. It's got more popular as time has gone on, but
Hmm.
it was things like the oxeye daisy, red campion, and people were liking foxgloves. These were the things that were kind of pulling people in and converting them a little bit, moving it away from this idea of a weed.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
So out of all of the mixes that you do, which is your personal favourite?
So the one that I plant the most, that's really interesting. I think I do tend to have a lot of the butterfly mix that I've always liked because
Yeah.
that's got a lot of the pinks. I love purple loose strife and which is for those who don't know, so it's got real long, spiky, very vibrant, kind of fuchsia purpley blooms, and I
Hmm.
like that with the red campion. I think that's really beautiful. But we also have an urban meadow, which is particularly nice, and that's got your oxeye daisy. And so some of those early mixes are my favorite flowers anyway.
And
So
are they enjoyed by? I mean, you'd mentioned your children a second ago. Are they enjoyed
yeah,
by your children now?
yeah, my children they love flowers. I mean, I guess that's part of it.
Well, they're
Um,
getting that inspiration from you, surely.
yeah,
You're
they've been growing since they were really little. And we've just moved, and this place has got no garden, so they're so excited to get stuck in and create from what has been a concreted over sad mess at the moment. So
So
that's yeah.
you'll be throwing seed balls all around. You'll be skipping around the garden throwing seed balls everywhere.
Oh God, yeah, everywhere. Encouraging the neighbours as well, pass them on to the neighbours. And another thing that we do is we actually in seed ball, not from a personal thing, is we give away seed balls to schools and community groups. Anyone
Yeah.
that wants to grow wildflowers, we give those away for free. So that's another way of kind of increasing biodiversity around here. So we'll be getting in touch personally with the local schools and offering seed balls that way.
Well, that's amazing because I've
Yeah.
shared several times on this podcast my journey into horticulture, and my imagination was inspired at a very very young age by a next door neighbour who I used to hop over our little garden fence with,
Oh,
and he nurtured my passion for everything gardening, everything from bonfires to growing tomatoes in his greenhouse and pruning his fruit trees and bonfires and milky cups of tea and sharpening the blades on his lawnmower. It
Oh,
was
it's
also
just beautiful.
yeah, and it was also a community group at school. There was a environmental and horticultural group that I used to attend after school, and again there was a like-minded, and we were classified as being, as you mentioned earlier, the weird children or the slightly geeky children or the ones that didn't really fit in any other group. But we all clubs together, and I'm still friends with some of those people now that we used to go and we used to look after areas of the school grounds. So always banging on about on the podcast. If you find a young person, obviously you have young children in your life. If you find a young person with any sort of passion towards gardening or horticulture, all you've got to do is give it space. You've got to feed it a little bit, and it will ignite into a passion that literally will last a lifetime. And if they're very, very lucky and they feed it well, it will turn into a career, just as mine did.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I think, and what a wonderful career to have. What a beautiful thing to be doing for both of us. I mean, it's just day after day filled with beautiful flowers, and for me, bees and butterflies. I mean, can't complain.
You, you can't indeed. It's been really wonderful to speak to you today. Just quickly tell the audience where they can find you and your products.
So if you want to come and find a little bit more about Seedball, then we're seedball.co.uk, but we also have Instagram, so you can find us at seed_ball, and we're there on Facebook, and yeah, and YouTube if you want to come and check out a few little things of how we've been scattering and growing. And I will be uploading, I guess, some videos of our new property as we rewild that.
Wonderful. I will look forward to seeing lots of that on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure. The passion for the product and the passion for biodiversity and wildflowers in general seems to completely ooze from you. So it's really, really lovely to speak to a fellow gardener. Enjoy the rest of your day, but thank you very much for your time today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been lovely having a chat.
Not a problem. See you again. Talk to you again soon. I
Bye.
thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Anna, but do need to take a moment just to extend my personal apologies to her for being late to our conversation, which happened just before Christmas. I hope that you head across to Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok and show their accounts some love. Her passion for wildflowers and conservation really shined through, and the conversation was an awful lot of fun. We're staying in the UK once again next week. Our guest is going to be Richard Groves, who's an account on Instagram sharing predominantly carnivorous plants. Now, behind the scenes, I know that Richard has massive collections of all sorts of plants, but carnivorous plants really do make him happy. And it's not a particular group of plants that I have a vast amount of knowledge on, so make sure that you tune in next week to catch that conversation. In the garden, I'm going to be weaving those willow hurdles out of the weeping willow offcuts and creating some wildlife breaks in the new peony garden, which used to be the wildflower meadow. I'm also going to set about building a giant cloche on hinges on one of my very large raised beds, which used to contain roses. This bed has now become impoverished and needs a little bit of a break, so I'm planning to grow salad crops like lettuce and radish in it next year. But I also have so many birds in the garden that not a lot of things get a chance to grow before they get destroyed by the birds or eaten by the pigeons. So I've had an idea of creating a hinged cloche top to this particular raised bed, which measures over 6 metres in length and around 1.5 metres in width. So join me on Instagram, YouTube and TikTok to see how I get along. The Gardener Ben podcast is brought to you in association with Peterbilt's Roses, winner of 30 Chelsea Gold medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbillsroses.com and make sure that you're following along on Instagram and TikTok. Until next week, happy gardening.